It's time for round one of Auburn versus Alabama. Who will come out victorious this weekend? Let's talk about it right here inside the town.
The Auburn Express. You are now listening to the War Report Longtown Podcast with your boy Ike Jones.
Yes, indeed, we are here inside of Lobtown, part of the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report, talking a little Iron Bowl of basketball. Round one of the matchups here inside of Coleman Coliseum coming up this Saturday. Auburn versus Alabama. It should be a phenomenal game. Hopefully, you all are as ready for this as I am. Auburn coming into this game after a win on the road versus Vanderbilt, a place that has been tough to get road wins this season, particularly for ranked opponents. And Auburn handled business there in double-digit fashion. Bama coming off of a shellacking of Texas on the road. So both teams coming in here with some momentum off of road wins. But, of course, one of the two teams will be at home in this one, that being the Crimson Tide. Um, and this is going to be, listen, this is a game of, in my opinion, two of the best teams in the country, right? Like, I think Auburn, Alabama, Florida, Duke, probably your best four teams in the country. And the polls say that as well. And right now, of those teams, when Auburn's faced them, they've lost. They lost to Florida. They lost to Duke, one on the road and one at home. Auburn needs to take care of business against a top five opponent here in order to continue to be the number one team in the country. Number one versus number two. First time in the history of the SEC. Definitely the first time these two teams have been this highly rated in this matchup. And it is a clash of two really offensively dominant teams over the season. Bama being the best scoring team in the country this season. They have put up 100 points multiple times, and they are currently the highest rated efficiency team in the SEC during SEC play. They are scoring at a phenomenal rate, and that goes up even more when they are inside of their own building. First, I want to look at kind of some of the things that Alabama does well, because I don't know how much of you guys actually watch Alabama basketball. I see people all the time talk about how bad Alabama's defense is, and I just don't know that that's they've improved pretty well during conference play at playing better defense. So I think some of the watching during non-con has people feeling like, oh, this Bama team doesn't play good defense, and it's really that they have such a high tempo rate that they allow teams to score a little bit when they get out in transition. And so they're giving up points just because there's so many possessions happening with the speed of the game that's happening there. But when we look at these two teams, both of them 10-1 in SEC play. Auburn with the slight edge because they've only had the two losses versus Bama having the three on the season. But right now, and then, Bama, of course, has the one home loss to Ole Miss where they had an abysmal game. And we'll talk about that a little bit when we get over into the Auburn side of things. But when you look at this, again, it's going to be tempo. Bama has the highest adjusted tempo rate of any team in conference play so far. So they are up and down the floor. They're taking quick shots. They're getting out in transition. They don't force a lot of turnovers, right? They don't do it via turnovers, right? Like they'll go and push it off of a make, right? Like inbound the ball and still push the ball up the floor. They just want to play fast. They want to get shots up quickly. They don't want to play against a set defense. And they do a pretty good job, though, when they get into the half court of trying to be patient and look for the best and most open shot. But they are a team that's going to let it fly out there. And they're, because of that, people think, oh, well, they're a team that's just jacking up threes. And that's not necessarily the case either. They're a team, they're in the top half in the conference in shooting threes at the rate at which they shoot threes. But they're not a team that just has to shoot threes. Now, if they're not hitting the threes very well, their offense doesn't look the same. But the reason why they can shoot a decent amount of threes and still have the offensive rating they have is because they have played well on the interior. and they have the best 2-point percentage during conference play of anyone in the SEC. So again, this is an offense that is high powered and can attack in multiple ways, multiple guys out there able to do things. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Bama is not a good offensive team or like they're a bad defensive team. And we'll talk about the defense here in a minute, but it's going to be about how they push and get out there in transition and in tempo. Even off of makes, Auburn can make a basket. They're still going to push it and try to get up the court really quickly. So no celebrating. No, make your shots, get back. Miss your shots, get back. Turnover, get back. Like, you need to be ready to move and get back down the floor, or they're going to get an easy bucket on the other end. Um, the other portion of what allows them to score so many points, and this is the one that is going to frustrate Auburn fans to no end if the whistle is not consistent and it's not going both ways, is this is a team that gets to the free throw line. They are the second best. Now, Auburn's played some really high free throw rate teams so far this season. Alabama does it just as well, and they've proven it over and over again throughout conference play. And they're in the top, I believe, 5 in the country in being able to do this, of getting to the free throw line. They just get to the line, man. And excuse me, they're in the top 20 in the country, not top 5 in the country. I think they're ranked 16th here, according to Bar Torvik. But number 2 in the conference, according to Bar Torvik, at being able to get to the free throw line since conference play has begun. And when you look at that number for home games, or teams are playing at home, it drops actually a little bit, surprisingly. I think maybe just because they tend to shoot more threes when they are at home, that 3-point rate goes up a little bit more, that 3-point percentage goes a little bit higher. But actually, they're shooting better from 2 at home than they are from 3. But what happens in that building is the energy is there, and they play really good, efficient basketball for some reason when they're inside of Coleman Coliseum. But the free throw rate is something that Auburn's going to have to figure out how to get past. How do you defend these guys that are going to listen? I'm just going to, you can say it's hate, whatever you want to. If you're a Bama fan watching this, they're throwing their body into players to try to draw fouls a lot. They are. Now, and the chief guy, who's, I'm not going to call anybody in particular. If you've watched this show before, you know my feelings about how some of their players do that sort of thing. But Grant Nelson gets to the line really well, and some other guys do. But again, I'm not gonna go down that path too much for you guys today. But if you watch this show, how I feel about it. But they're going to get to the free throw line, and Auburn fans just need to play through it. Auburn players need to play through it, I should say, and fans just need to expect it. So it's going to be a difficult watch if they're getting a very tight whistle, because Auburn's going to play with physicality, and Auburn has the physicality advantage in this game. But in order for what tends to happen in these games when Auburn has the physicality advantage is that teams come in saying, Auburn's going to be physical, you need to be first to hit. And they're going to do that. They're going to be first to hit, but then Auburn's going to push back and they're going to get the fouls. I don't mean like actually they get hit and then you retaliate. I mean, okay, all right, cool. Somebody's cutting across the lane. We're bumping cutters because we don't want them to come across the lane. And Auburn's like, oh, okay, we're playing a physical game. They didn't call that. So when they're driving, we're gonna, body them, and then you get the foul call on that. And you're like, yo, we just didn't get that call on the other end of the floor. Auburn needs to learn how to just adjust to how it's being officiated, even if it's different on different ends of the floor. And that's going to be a frustrating thing if it starts to happen in that way. So the free throw rate is going to be something I'm monitoring. The foul trouble is going to be something I'm monitoring because, again, Auburn does have the advantage on the interior as far as guys from a physical standpoint who are able to get out there and defend in the paint. What Alabama does a really good job of, though, is they crash and get offensive boards, right? And so even when they're not, and that's another reason why they score so much, is because the efficiency goes up on that second shot, right? The open three that comes off of the offensive board. And Auburn's been getting hammered on the glass, on the offensive glass, and they've got to figure out a way to limit it. They did a pretty good job against Florida, but Florida was just knocking down everything. It didn't matter. But they did a decent job against Florida. It was just in key spots they weren't coming up with the boards. But as far as overall in that game, they were able to match what Florida was doing. But Bama is going to be able to score, and they're going to score a lot unless you can cut down their second chance opportunities. They get one shot at it, you close it out with a defensive board, and then you play efficiently on offense, you should be okay. When we look at the Auburn defense facing this very tough Bama offense, you have to look at how Auburn's able to block shots, because Bama actually is a team that gets their shot blocked a lot. And in conference play, they are in the lower half of the conference of teams that are able to avoid getting their shot blocked. And Auburn is one of the best shot blocking teams in the country. And this is part of the reason I've talked about this before. This is part of the reason why Auburn surrenders a lot of offensive boards, is because of the way they play help defense with their bigs rotating over to try to help block a shot, not there to secure an offensive rebound from the guy that they've left. So that tends to happen a little bit when you go try to block shots a lot. But it needs to be another situation where Auburn is second off of the floor, contesting, but not trying to block everything unless you are sure and they're up in the air, using verticality, all of those things that they need to be able to do. But it's going to be a game where they're going to be tested in that regard for sure. But from a defensive efficiency standpoint, Auburn is tied for first in the conference in defensive efficiency, according to Bartorvik, meaning they, we've talked about this before if you've watched the show, not a team that forces a lot of turnovers. They just force bad looks. They force you into tough shots, and they don't allow you to get clean looks. Now, people are going to scream, oh, look what happened against Florida. Yeah, Florida actually made a lot of tough shots in that game. Now, they had some open looks as well, and Auburn needs to clean that stuff up. Same thing happened at points during the Vanderbilt game. And, I actually, if you compare stylistically what Vanderbilt likes to do offensively, it's going to be a lot like what Bama likes to do. It's going to look a lot like that LSU game. Going to look a lot like the Oklahoma game. All three games in which Auburn has won. The difference is Bama's got a little bit more height on the interior than those teams did. Those teams ran because they are smaller. Bama runs because it's their DNA, right? And it's even with taller players, they're going to get out and run. So it's not going to be quite as easy. And I say easy as if, those games were a piece of cake. Auburn did win all of those by double figures, but it's not going to be quite as easy to be able to defend the full shot clock and then come down with that offensive board, because Bama does have length on the interior. So it's going to be a more difficult game from that standpoint of trying to deal with that. Going to probably, if you look kind of at what Missouri did in that first game, is where Auburn really needs to be in this game. First game of the SEC contest, it is. So that's really what you're going to need to look at for this game. If you're in here, watching us for the first time and you haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that right now while we're in the midst of talking about this, and flip it over here and look a little bit at the other side. But in case, for whatever reason, you want to be able to get in on a different kind of fun, today's show is sponsored by the good folks at Underdog. There's not really an underdog in this contest. You're looking at the number 1 and number 2 teams in the country. Even though there is going to be a favorite as far as a betting line is concerned, when you look at Vegas, or if you look at predictive models and all that, somebody's going to be favored, but that doesn't matter when you go to Underdog. It's really about picking a player and determining, do you want to say whether the statistic for that player is higher or lower than the projection from Underdog? If you do that and you get it right, you could potentially have an entry that would win you a little cash. If you use code REPORT when you sign up for new customers, you can get up to $1,000 in bonus cash there. Make sure that you check out the restrictions that apply and what type of game you're playing. If you're in the state of Alabama playing champions, or if you're in one of the other bordering states like Georgia, you're playing the straight up Underdog Fantasy contest. But anyway, go to underdogfantasy.com. Again, use code REPORT when you do, and you get up to $1,000 in bonus cash on your first deposit. Let's continue talking about this game, flip it over to the other side, and talk about the strengths of Auburn offensively versus what potentially is going to be Bama's strengths defensively. Point blank period, what allows Auburn to potentially win this game is going to be on the shoulders of Janai Broome and Chaney Johnson as the interior scorers for Auburn. Now, Dylan Cardwell and being able to go and get offensive rebounds and create additional opportunities is going to be important. Same thing when you get into the other bigs. If they're going to play some Jaheim Hudson in this game, him being able to do that offensively. But in order for Auburn to score points, you need to have big games from your two scoring bigs. Chaney Johnson just had an amazing game versus Vanderbilt. Janai Broome has been struggling here and there, but he has a clear and distinct advantage against a team in Alabama that has enough length that they may not send the double team consistently to him and try to make him finish over the top of some bigs who do a decent job of being able to play in the paint with their length, right? If Janai Broome is able to physically dominate on the interior from an offensive standpoint, Auburn should win this game just because they should be able to play in the half court and be able to get some good shots off of the assist that Janai Broome can create once he gets going down there. Same thing with Chaney Johnson. Chaney Johnson's not as good a passer, a little bit less patient when he's down there in the paint. He's more of a scorer and finisher down there than he is of a facilitator and playmaker. But if Chaney's having a good game on the interior, Auburn's going to be able to play in the half court and do the things they need to do to slow the tempo down and get themselves good shots consistently. So that's going to be important in this game because it should lead to open and good 3-point shots if you're able to dominate on the interior. And because you can have that level of domination because you have the guys that can do that, it should lead to high efficiency 3-point shooting. Like you should get some good open looks. And I think Miles Kelly is due for another game where he gets himself hot from the I think this is a game where I'm expecting Miles Kelly to hit 2 or 3 threes. Denver Jones just had another good game after having a tough outing. Hopefully he can string 2 together there for you. And Tahad Pettiford needs to break out of a little bit of a slump that he's had offensively. Again, when he's played against some of the better teams on this schedule, that's when he's shown up his best. You're going to need one of those Tahad Pettiford performances in this one. Just because, again, Bama's a team that's going to score a bunch, so Auburn needs to figure out how to score as well. When you look at what Bama does defensively, again, a lot of people are like, oh, Bama doesn't play good defense. They don't play good defense. They don't force a ton of turnovers, but they have been one of the better defensive teams in the country. Now, Auburn doesn't turn the ball over since conference play, I should say. They've been one of the better defensive teams in the conference and in the country. Since conference play began, they've stepped their level of defensive intensity up. They don't force a ton of turnovers, but they don't allow teams to really get good, clean looks at the basket. But this is a thing that I have noted before. A lot of the teams in this league do not have a Janai Broome-esque player. As much as Janai Broome may be struggling right now with his interior twos and missing some close buckets, he still has the gravity that rotates towards him that allows for your offense to function differently than some of these other teams that Bama's playing against that are more perimeter oriented, which fit into the frenetic style of play that they have defensively. If Janai Broome dominates, Bama's got to figure out a different kind of way to speed that game up. And they're going to need to really knock down a bunch of shots from 3 to be able to do that. But they're one of the best 3-point defensive teams. They allow the fewest amount of 3-pointers to be shot, and they defend the 3 really well. Right. And so that's why it's important for Janai Broome to be able to do what he does and have that gravity come towards him so that he can get it out there for open looks if Bama needs to double team. And I mentioned that Auburn was tied for first in defensive efficiency in SEC play. The team they're tied with is Alabama. Bama is the other team that is playing the best, most efficient defense of anyone in the conference right now. So this is going to be a clash of titans. Absolutely. If a team runs away with this and it becomes a double-digit win, it's because someone found the recipe for either getting a bunch of easy buckets, Bama turns the ball over a bunch, something like that, or Bama is absolutely scorching from 3 in this game, and Auburn's not able to match the number of points. So we talked about this a little bit on the midweek show, that if this game holds to the defensive numbers, Auburn wins this game fairly easily, because I do think that Auburn's the better defensive team. If it becomes a defensive contest, I put my money on Auburn to be able to come out with the victory. If it becomes a shootout, I don't know that you can outshoot Bama. I just don't know that that's possible. And then it'll become about timely stops. And when you're in that time, that shootout type of thing, what I've seen from this Auburn team is the poor shot selection in those moments where you feel like you got to play match. Oh, you hit one and you're getting out on a roll. I need to hit one to either stop this run or get us going. And then they take bad shots in those instances, which can lead to more runouts and extension of leads or tightening of a game in those scenarios. So it's a game that I expect to be a good one. I am looking forward to it. I will be right there in Coleman Coliseum checking it out from the sideline. I look forward to hearing from you all. What do you think is going to happen in this game? I'm not giving any predictions today, but what I am telling you is these are the ways in which I see this going and potentially going in Auburn's favor is interior and forcing turnovers / limiting the number of shots that they have by doing better on the offensive glass. But I can easily talk myself into a scenario in which Auburn loses this game as well, just because I do think that Bama is a good team. There's no denying that. So I am looking forward to hearing from you all, though. I want score predictions. I want thoughts. I want comments, all of that right down there in the comments section. Before you get out of here, if you haven't already, please hit the thumbs up on this video. Share the content with somebody. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. I will be back at you talking a little bit more about this game probably on Sunday, the Sunday after this game, because I'll be at the game. So no watch party or anything from me, but we probably will have a post game here on the channel. So you guys make sure you get in here for the reaction for that. But I'm out of here until the next time. And as always, War Eagle.